In 1967, a British man named Paddy Roy Bates founded his own country. He and his supporters occupied an old British naval installation in the North Sea, which Bates claimed as the territory of the Principality of Sealand. The object consists of a small steel deck with two hollow concrete towers standing on a sandbar in the sea. Since it fell into disuse shortly after World War II, the naval fort stood vacant for about 10 years before squatters made it theirs. Bates put up a flag, wrote a constitution, and declared himself Sealand's rightful ruler. Other than a flag and a constitution, Sealand also has its own national anthem, passports, coins, stamps, sports teams, and an official website. Usually, Sealand is only inhabited by few people at once. Its more than 50 citizens live abroad most of the time. But in any case, there's always at least one person around to defend Sealand from invaders. Sealand is one of the many curious cases of micronations. Small regions that someone claims to be independent states, often without any reasonable basis for it. If you're now thinking, anybody can do that, then you're absolutely right. It's only a matter of how far you're willing to take it. There are loads of micronations existing on the internet. It's the work of a few minutes to write a website about some state you thought up, put it online, and boom, you're now regent of your own country. But when it gets interesting is when people don't just settle for an internet state, but rather try to make it the real deal by transforming that thought into a place, a territory. The only way to get a territory is to either take it from another country or pick a spot that nobody else wants. If you're gonna take another country's clay, you're just asking for trouble. It's much easier to just claim territory that isn't already taken. But that would put your beloved state either somewhere in international waters or in some kind of wasteland. I don't have to point out why both are bad options, right? So this is where most micronations trip. They either have no territory or claim land that they don't control. There are pretty bad starting conditions for micronations. That's why most cease to exist shortly after their proclamation. Others only stay an idea, without real-world consequences. The thing that makes Sealand pretty unique among micronations is that it holds its own territory and has been ruling there for decades. To be fair, it isn't the biggest or most valuable territory, but it's independently governed nonetheless. And that's an even bigger accomplishment when you consider that Sealand is actually right on the UK's doorstep. But the UK stays pretty chill about that. Although it initially tried to get the inhabitants of Sealand off the fort, it didn't take long before they gave up and decided to just ignore its existence. But the question remains, is Sealand a real state? There are a few things to consider here. Statehood doesn't have a switch that's either on or off. Declaring independence is only the beginning. Sealand is merely a tolerated annoyance, not a widely recognized state. If some other state wanted to, it could swallow up Sealand easily. So how can Sealand become the bona fide state it wants to be? There's actually an agreement on that. The Montevideo Convention. Its first article clearly states 4 points that have to be accomplished for a state to exist. A permanent population, a defined territory, a government, and the capacity to enter into relations with other states. So there you go, you have your checklist. Problem solved, right? Nope. Although pretty much all countries agree on the validity of the Montevideo Convention, getting them to follow its rules is a whole different matter, and countries don't tend to like separatists. So even if all 4 boxes are ticked, finding a sovereign state to officially recognize your state will be nearly impossible. It's nice that someone had the sense to define what constitutes a state, but in reality, it's utterly worthless when states claiming sovereignty can just be ignored at will. What you really need is the right friends to get you into the club. A state is only an idea that gets its power from the people believing in it. If other states won't recognize a state's existence, then the state doesn't exist. And to be seen as non-existent is not a comfortable position to be in. Case study. The Republic of Rhode Island. In 1968, an Italian engineer had a small platform built in the Adriatic Sea near the Italian coast. He eventually declared it an independent state. Much like Sealand, it had its own flag, government, and currency. It also featured a restaurant, a bar, and a post office. But it didn't work out for too long. Only 55 days after declaring its independence, the Republic of Rhode Island was seized by Italian authorities. They strapped the whole thing with explosives and brought it crashing down into the sea. And that was that. It could have gone the same way for Sealand easily. Under these circumstances, the fact that it has existed for nearly 50 years is absolutely astonishing. And yeah, of course it's a great story to tell. A guy who stood up to the man, who would not have it anymore, setting out to found his own nation on the sea. But don't be tricked by it. No matter how sovereign Sealand believes itself to be, when push comes to shove, it's undoubtedly dependent on the goodwill of the UK. Without a military to watch over it, without other countries to back it up, without an economy that investors want to protect, Sealand is an island alone in the world. And that's about it. If you like this video, feel free to like and share it. If you want to tell me just about anything, please do so in the comments. Thanks for checking in. That's all, peeps.